There's a scene in Cinderella that's not suitable for children. She's excited, ready for the ball, wearing a dress that belonged to her mother, but when her stepsisters see her, they become jealous and tear her clothes off. She begs them to stop, but they continue until she's left with her clothes torn and completely humiliated. It leaves you feeling like you've witnessed a scene of intimate abuse. And it makes sense, because it's the physical representation of the psychological abuse Cinderella has endured for years at the hands of her stepmother and stepsisters. I always thought Cinderella was weak, a good girl who just waited for a prince to save her. And I don't think I was the only one. It's a pretty common idea. But when I rewatched the movie as an adult, I realized that we're seeing it backwards. She's not passive, nor is she anti-feminist. What perhaps is the way we judge her. Because we still believe that only those who are tough, cold, and imposing are strong. That is, those who embody traditionally masculine values, and we belittle everything that sounds too feminine, such as kindness, empathy, sensitivity, or caring. But perhaps that says much more about us than about her. Today, we're going to question our own prejudices and look at Cinderella with new eyes. We're going to reinterpret her in a way that does her justice, because before she was a princess, she was a victim, and above all, a survivor. Cinderella has a father who adores her. He showers her with love, but no matter how hard he tries, there's something he cannot fill, the void left by the death of her mother. He knows that his absence will weigh heavily on her, so he decides to remarry. He chooses a woman from a good family, with 2 daughters the same age as Cinderella, Anastasia and Griselda. But without knowing it, he has just ruined her life. Shortly after, her father dies in an accident, and with him goes the only person who truly loved Cinderella. The stepmother stops pretending. In reality, she hates Cinderella. She hates her beauty and charm. She hates that, without even trying, she's already everything her daughters will never be. She doesn't kick her out of the house. She allows her to stay, but as a servant. While Anastasia and Griselda live like queens, spending their father's inheritance, Cinderella sleeps in the attic with the rats, the dust, and the memory of a life that no longer belongs to her. However, despite everything, she remains kind. She doesn't let the pain turn her into someone cruel, much less someone who gives up. She doesn't lose hope that someday her dream of happiness will come true. In the morning, the birds and mice wake her up, and she sighs. It's time to return to reality. Even so, she gets up with her head held high. Her friends help her bathe, dress, and clean, and she does her best to start the day with a smile. Cinderella is probably one of the most misunderstood iconic characters. For years, she's been used as an example of a submissive and passive woman who just waits for a prince to come and rescue her. But if we put aside what we think we know about Cinderella and analyze her story more carefully, we can see that this is a superficial and unfair interpretation. Since she was a child, Cinderella lost both her parents. And although we are used to fairy tales starting this way, we must not forget that this is one of the hardest things that can happen to anyone. Think about it for a second. How would you have felt if you had lost your mom and dad as a child? How would that have changed the way you live your life? Most likely, you would have grown up with a great emptiness. You would have felt that nothing in the world is completely safe. You would have found it difficult to trust, open up, and bond with others again. Maybe you would have become quieter, less cheerful, and tougher. And maybe you would have stopped expecting good things from the future. We see something like this in Cinderella. She is not someone for whom happiness and hope come easily. You can tell she carries a great sadness. She has a hard time starting the day. She prefers to stay in her dreams rather than face such a harsh reality. But even so, she gets up. She tries hard to smile and do what she has to do. This is not weakness or submission. On the contrary, to me it seems like strength and perseverance, even though we may not always see it that way. We tend to associate kindness, joy, or friendliness with naivety or weakness. But the ability to remain kind in the face of a hostile environment, to find reasons to smile after a loss, and to maintain hope after several blows requires a strong character. Resisting without losing one's humanity may be one of the most courageous ways to face life. That's why I don't think it's fair to label Cinderella as weak, passive, or submissive. She fights every day. She resists without hardening or becoming cynical. Perhaps the problem is not that she's anti-feminist, but that our way of evaluating her is filtered by cultural bias. We have learned to associate strength with dominance, toughness, aggressiveness, and control, attributes historically linked to masculinity, and to ignore or underestimate the strength found in traditionally feminized values, such as empathy, care, kindness, and remarkable emotional resilience, which are, in fact, key internal resources for coping with adversity and sustaining one's own and others' well-being, regardless of whether you're male or female.
Just a quick pause to say that if you're enjoying this video and haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It would mean a lot and really helps me keep making more videos and content like this. Alright, let's get back to the story.
Jacques, one of the mice, arrives agitated. A little mouse got caught in a trap. Without thinking twice, Cinderella runs to free him. She welcomes him warmly, gives him clothes, and names him Gus. While her stepmother and stepsisters are still asleep, Cinderella is already doing all the household chores. She opens the curtains, wakes up Lucifer, the spoiled cat, and takes him to the kitchen for breakfast. There she meets Bruno, the dog, who's kicking in his sleep. He's dreaming that he's chasing Lucifer. Cinderella warns him that he must be more discreet with his dreams. If the stepmother finds out, they could throw him out in the street, and he would lose his warm bed. She advises him that, for his own good, he should learn to like cats. This scene was a direct reflection of Cinderella's situation and philosophy. Like Bruno, she also has dreams that could upset her stepmother. To leave that house, be free, and to have a better life, but she can't afford to say them or act on them, because if her stepmother finds out, she could take away what little she has: a roof over her head, a bed, some food. Cinderella's often criticized for staying where she's mistreated, for doing nothing, or for waiting for someone else to rescue her. But before judging her, we must understand her context. Cinderella's about 19 years old and lives in a time, probably between the 17th and 18th centuries, when an unmarried woman could not work, have her own income, or rent a house. She couldn't even move freely without a man's permission. She had no money, no family, and no support network. Leaving was not a matter of courage, but rather practically a sentence to extreme poverty, exploitation, or death. Given this, I insist that Cinderella does not stay out of passivity or submission, but because she is realistic, intelligent, and strategic. She knows she can't leave, at least not for now, so she focuses on the only thing she can control: her attitude. When she told Bruno that, for his own good, he should learn to like cats, she was talking about something she herself practices. Cinderella understands that hating her stepmother will not solve the situation, and that open confrontation would only increase the risk to her. That's why she conserves her emotional energy and avoids fighting against what she cannot change at the moment. Instead, she adapts and looks for small strategies to preserve her well-being within a situation she did not choose, while maintaining hope that circumstances may change over time. It's breakfast time. Cinderella calls all the animals to feed them. The mice try to approach, but they encounter a problem: Lucifer. To distract him, Jacques approaches him, kicks him, and runs away, while the others take advantage of the opportunity to collect food. But Lucifer is not fooled for long. He spots Gus and starts chasing him. Gus runs, climbs onto a table, and hides inside a teacup. Cinderella, unaware of what's just happened, takes the tray with the cups and brings them to her stepsisters. When they see the mouse, they scream in horror and accuse her of doing it on purpose. The stepmother calls her immediately. She tells her that if she has time to play pranks, she also has time for more chores. Cinderella tries to explain, but she won't let her speak. She just gives her instructions: clean the carpet, wash the windows, dust the tapestries and curtains, sweep the hallways and stairs, mend, sew, wash clothes, and also bathe Lucifer. Meanwhile, at the palace, the king is furious. His only son doesn't want to marry, and he's desperate to have grandchildren. He decides to organize a ball and invite all the unmarried women in the kingdom. That same night, his son will meet his future wife. Back at home, the stepsisters practice a song. They sing so badly that even Lucifer leaves the room. Cinderella sings the same song, but with an angelic voice. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. A letter from the palace has arrived. The stepmother reads the invitation, and Cinderella lights up, but her stepsisters mock her. How does she think she can go? She defends herself. The letter says all unmarried women. The stepmother looks at her, thinks for a second, and says yes, but only if she finishes all her chores. Cinderella, excited, gets to work. The stepsisters are outraged. Why did she give her permission? The stepmother smiles maliciously, because she won't finish. Cinderella looks for the only dress she has. It belonged to her mother. It's out of style, but with a little time, she can fix it. Except, of course, they won't let her. The stepsisters yell at her and give her more chores to do. The day goes on, and the dress is forgotten. The mice know they won't let her finish, so they take matters into their own hands. Jacques and Gus sneak into the stepsisters' room. Among the things they've thrown away, they find ribbons, fabrics, and decorations. Everything they need to help her. But even though their intentions are good, they'll bring her more problems. The time for the ball arrives. Cinderella finishes her chores, but not her dress. She locks herself in her room. Suddenly, the closet opens, and there it is, the dress transformed, shining like new. Cinderella can't believe it. She changes quickly, and she catches up with the others just in time. Her stepsisters look at her and are consumed with jealousy. They complain to their mother that she can't go. She stares at Cinderella. She recognizes the fabrics and embellishments on the dress. She glances at her daughters, and that's enough. They pounce on her. They call her a thief. They start ripping her clothes off. She begs them to stop, but they continue. They enjoy seeing her break down until they leave her with the dress torn to shreds, completely humiliated. In many classic fairy tales, the villain is not a monster or a witch, but a stepmother, as in Snow White or Rapunzel, and almost always the victim is a teenager. Why does this pattern repeat itself so often? Because the figure of the stepmother functions as a symbol. She represents the opposite of the maternal ideal. Culturally, motherhood is associated with tenderness, care, protection, and emotional support. The stepmother, occupying the same place of the mother, but not being the natural mother, embodies a version stripped of these attributes, becoming their opposite: cold, hostile, and lacking empathy. Carl Jung described something similar in his archetype of the Great Mother, which brings together the traits attributed to mothers throughout history. As in all archetypes, there's a polarity, a favorable expression and a destructive one. The favorable expression is the nurturing mother, who represents protection, kindness, affection, and sustenance. The destructive expression is the devouring mother, who embodies possessiveness, control, manipulation, tyranny, and destruction. The devouring mother does not care for, but rather controls. She does not raise her child to be independent, but rather overprotects them. She doesn't guide, but rather criticizes and corrects their every move. And when that child wants to grow up or go their own way, she makes them feel guilty, selfish, or ungrateful. This pattern appears again and again in stories where the victims are teenagers, especially girls. This is no coincidence. Adolescence is the time when daughters begin to differentiate themselves from their mothers, to think for themselves, to define their desires, to make their own decisions. And for some mothers, this is very difficult to accept. The reasons may vary. Some see their daughter as an extension of themselves, a second chance to achieve what they did not, so they exercise control and sabotage any attempt at independence. Others feel envy or resentment if their daughters obtain virtues, recognition, or goals that they always wanted but never achieved. It could also be that the mother's identity is so tied to her daughter's dependence that her autonomy is perceived as a threat to her own existence. In any of these cases, instead of accompanying and encouraging growth, they try to control it. They criticize, correct, and stifle difference. They often do so under the guise of it's for her own good, so she doesn't make the same mistakes, when in reality, they're not protecting their daughter, but their own wounds. Cinderella's stepmother embodies the devouring mother impeccably. She shows no tenderness or care, only coldness and contempt. She does not educate, but controls. She dictates to her daughters how to dress, what to say, and whom to marry. She projects her own frustrations onto them, wanting them to achieve what she could not: marry a prince, gain status, and be recognized. And she's also envious of Cinderella. Her beauty, grace, and kindness make her uncomfortable, and so she mistreats and represses her. Cinderella cries inconsolably, and just when she thinks there's no hope left, her fairy godmother appears. With a wave of her wand and a bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, she gives her everything she needs to go to the ball: a carriage, a coachman, and best of all, a beautiful dress and glass slippers. Just as we said that the stepmother represents the devouring mother, we can see in the fairy godmother the representation of the nurturing mother. That figure who guides and provides support when needed, but who also has the power to transform and give new life. The fairy godmother is the one who allows Cinderella to go to the ball, to be loved, and to become a princess. She is the one who gives her the chance to be happy and to live her dream. The nurturing mother seeks the well-being of her children not through overprotection, but by helping them become self-sufficient and independent people. One detail about the fairy godmother that I found particularly significant was when Cinderella was emotionally defeated, and she appeared to comfort her and give her a boost. She provided the dress, the carriage, and the slippers, but she did not accompany her to the ball. She didn't dictate what to say, how to behave, or how to win over a prince. She gave her the necessary tools and then stepped aside, trusting that Cinderella would know how to use them. This is a clear representation of the nurturing mother. She prepares you for the journey, but she does not walk it for you. The party begins at the palace. The unmarried women of the kingdom are presented to the prince, but he shows no interest in any of them until she enters. Cinderella doesn't even see him. She's too busy admiring the place. Everything seems magical to her. But then the prince sees her, and he can't take his eyes off her. He approaches her, introduces himself, and asks her to dance. This moment was key in dismantling the idea that Cinderella only wanted the prince to rescue her. because she didn't go to the ball looking for a boyfriend, nor did she want to impress anyone. It was because, for the first time in a long time, she had the opportunity to have fun, and she wanted to take advantage of it. When she entered the palace, she didn't even notice the prince, and that is precisely what caught his attention. The prince had already met all the women in the kingdom, and many of them were probably just as beautiful, but they were all focused on pleasing him and getting his attention. Except Cinderella. She didn't want anything from him. She was just being herself. And that authenticity and simplicity were what really captivated him. And with that, the film's final message changes completely. In a moment, you'll understand why. The king, delighted, doesn't waste a second. He orders the musicians to play the most romantic song and the servants to dim the lights. Cinderella and the prince dance. Little by little, they fall in love. They go out to the garden, talk, laugh, and their connection grows stronger. Time flies by. They're about to kiss when suddenly the clock strikes midnight. Cinderella is frightened. She apologizes and runs away. The prince goes after her, asking for her name, address, anything so he can find her, but she doesn't answer. She only thinks about leaving the palace before the magic ends. On the stairs, she drops a glass slipper, and the duke picks it up. Just as she leaves the palace, the spell is broken. The carriage turns into a pumpkin, and the dress returns to its original state. Everything disappears, except for one thing. The slipper. It remains intact. Despite being in the middle of the road with no way to return, Cinderella can't wipe the smile off her face. She says that the man she met was so wonderful. She's sure even the prince himself couldn't be like that. In other words, she doesn't even know who she danced with. She looks up at the sky and thanks her fairy godmother for giving her such a special night. At the castle, the duke is trembling. He doesn't know how to explain to the king that they lost the girl, that the only clue they have is a shoe. The king is furious, but he calms down when he hears that the prince has decided to marry the owner of that shoe. It doesn't matter who she is or where she comes from. If it fits, she is the one. The king, ecstatic, wastes no time. He orders that they go house to house to try it on all the women in the kingdom. The news reaches Cinderella's house. The stepmother immediately wakes her daughters. She's determined that one of them will marry the prince. Cinderella hears everything and is shocked. That man, so kind and gentle, was the prince, and he is looking for her. For a moment, she dares to imagine a different life. Her stepmother notices her reaction and becomes suspicious. She follows her to a room and locks her in. Cinderella tries to get out, begs her, but it's useless. Just then, the king's servants arrive with the glass slipper. The stepmother welcomes them and introduces her daughters. Gus and Jacques put a plan into action, steal the key from the stepmother's pocket to free Cinderella. Griselda is the first to try it on. Her foot doesn't even fit halfway in. The mice get the key. All that's left is to climb all those stairs. Anastasia is already about to try on the shoe. There's no time to lose. They finally arrive with Cinderella. They give her the key. The duke prepares to leave. He asks if there are any other young ladies in the house. The stepmother answers with complete certainty that there are not, but Cinderella appears. She asks if she can try too. The stepmother tries to stop her, but the duke clarifies he has orders to try it on all the maidens in the kingdom. The servant runs with the slipper, but the stepmother puts her foot in. He stumbles, and the shoe breaks into 1,000 pieces. The duke cries inconsolably. The king is going to kill him. But Cinderella's not upset. She takes out of her pocket the other slipper. The stepmother's horrified. The duke and mice are ecstatic. Cinderella tries it on. It fits perfectly. Finally, she marries the prince. As she leaves the church, she drops the slipper again. The king picks it up and puts it on. She kisses him on the forehead, and he smiles from ear to ear. Cinderella gets into the carriage with the prince, and they head off to a life very different from the one she had before, one of love and happiness. After watching the movie carefully, you realize that maybe, all this time, we were misinterpreting it. It's much more than a love story. It's the story of a girl who, despite growing up in an environment full of abuse and pain, managed to build a life different from the one she was given. And she didn't do it because someone came to rescue her. The real reason was that she decided not to let the pain turn her into someone she didn't want to be. After losing her parents and enduring years of psychological abuse, she had every reason to shut down inside, to give in to bitterness, cynicism, or despair. But every day, she chose to maintain a kind and gentle attitude, and that ability to preserve her values and her way of being, even in adverse conditions, was what made the difference. Because at the ball, it wasn't the dress or the appearance that caught the prince's attention, but her authenticity and her human warmth. Not allowing herself to be defined by suffering allowed her to be open to a different life. And it was that openness that enabled her to recognize and seize opportunities when they arose. I know it's a fairy tale, and that real life doesn't always work that way, but we can take away an important message. When you're in an unfair or overwhelming situation, maintaining your hope, your kindness, and your values does not guarantee that everything will change immediately, but it does create better conditions for coping with what you're going through, identifying opportunities and seizing them when they arise. I don't believe the prince saved her. I believe that Cinderella, with her inner strength, consistency, and decisions, saved herself.
Thanks for staying until the end of the video. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with a friend who you think might enjoy it. And you and I'll see you in the next one.